All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And as you know, I am a thrifter and I like to find other people's treasures and make them my own for a time. And I kind of see thrifting as an archaeological dig of sorts. So today I am going to be sharing my collection of treasures specific to dogs. And I really do try and find out as much history as I can from each find. So I'll be sharing a bunch of images and sharing a few stories. These are just some of the books that I have collected over the years from thrift shops. My local Goodwill is right near LMU. It's good to have a thrift shop near a university. And you can see that some of those are actually Getty publications. And fun fact about that Jansen History of Art that I know many of us had to purchase in college, that first came out in 1962, and it wasn't until 1986 that a single woman artist was mentioned. And it was Judy Chicago and her painting Dinner Party. Okay, from my decorative arts pavilion, I have this, which I thought had a real kind of Ralph Lauren sort of quality. It's made in England. It's a magazine and newspaper holder, and it is brass wrapped around wood. From my glass collection, um, this is not all completely glass. Actually, the head is plastic and actually unscrews. This is it. And that is because it's actually an aftershave from Avon called At Point. This is hanging in my den, and I loved the whimsical quality of it. It is by a British illustrator and painter named Harry Nielsen, and it is 8.5 by 15. It came matted and framed, and it's Mr. Fox's Hunt, Breakfast on Christmas Day. So you see these foxes dressed up for a hunt. They are eating pheasant and drinking Reynard, which is French for fox. And there are dog heads mounted on the wall. And those paintings on the wall behind them are of foxes in pursuit of men. Okay, this is in my kitchen, and this is it. I paid $4.99, and I just loved the simplicity of it. And it's by an artist named Stephen Hunick, who was a self-taught wood carver, furniture maker, sculptor, printmaker, and author. And this is him with his tools behind him. And these are some of the books he wrote. Um, and in 1994, he fell down a flight of stairs while he was carrying a sculpture and he broke ribs. He was in a coma for a few months and he would make a recovery, but he was inspired to build, along with his wife Gwendolyn, also an artist, a dog chapel in Vermont where they lived. And the chapel was a replica of a New England church from the 1820s. And he wanted to have like a ritual space for people to travel to and have some kind of closure over the loss of a beloved dog. And this is it. This is called Dog Mountain. It is in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And it's on 150 acres, and there are hiking trails. And this is the chapel. And originally, there was one wall designated for people to leave messages and photos. But as you can see, uh, these messages have sort of taken over the space. And when you go, should you go, this will be the sign to welcome you. Welcome all creeds, all breeds, no dogmas allowed. Okay, this is my bronze. It is right here. It is 3 pounds. This I also paid $4.99 for, and it is by an artist named Mark Wallace. It is called the Pitbull Barbecue Pit. And please notice the use of perspective, the pit bull beer, the tattoo that says Mudda. Um, I actually brought this to the Getty Villa and showed it to a curator at the lunch table, and he was incredibly gracious about it. And it was David Saunders. And this is the back. And I did look for other Fablestone bronzes online and didn't find any, but I found one Fablestone in terracotta by the artist, and it's actually on eBay right now. And this is it. And of course, this is French bulldogs drinking champagne in a Paris cafe, serenaded by an accordion player. And Wallace was known, this is him. He died young of a brain aneurysm, but he was known for his anthropomorphic art, giving human traits and qualities to animals. And he had a cartoon called Warthaven and a comic strip called Vixen's Keep. And he also did reenactments of medieval events. And this is just one of his cartoons that I found online. Okay, this is very big. It's hanging on my landing, and it is by the artist Stephen Hubble. And this is a Chesapeake Bay retriever uh, called Cooper. And this is how I found it. It was in this frame and this mat, and there was even this brass plaque. So from that, I was able to get a lot of information. When I found this, next to it, hanging next to it, was a photo of also framed and matted of this same dog in competition in a dog show with his handler. But I didn't buy the photo. But I did buy the painting. And as you can see, it's pretty big. And this is gouache on canvas, and gouache is watercolor and white pigment. And here stands Cooper, the Chesapeake Bay retriever, at the edge of the Pacific Ocean. And from this, I was able to look up the artist, and this is him. And he was an artist, an art director, an illustrator, a dog handler, a show judge, and he is considered one of the finest dog portrait artists in the world. And his work is in the Museum of the Dog, which is in New York City. But who did the Chesapeake Bay Retriever belong to? It belonged to this man named Randall Austin, and he died in 2013 after having cancer for 4 years. And I found the painting in 2019, so somebody had it for a few years, or maybe it was in storage. But from what I read about this man, he was charming. He worked in promotions as a music executive. He got radio stations to play Jackson Browne, Running on Empty, Linda Ronstadt, Blue Bayou, the Eagles, Queen, We Are the Champions, We Will Rock You. And if the name Austin sounds familiar, he came from a music industry family. because his father was Mo Austin. And if you're a UCLA alum, you might know that name. Mo Austin was legendary in the music industry. He started a record company with Frank Sinatra. He would be the CEO of Warner Brothers Records for many years. And he would donate $10 million dollars for the Evelyn and Mo Austin Music Center, which is on the campus of UCLA. And he would donate more millions for a basketball practice area. And I have to show you the Austin family home because it's historically significant. And I think it might be where Cooper was photographed by the beach. And this is it. And this is the Wave House. And it was designed by Harry Gessner. And this was his most famous work. Gessner was an architect and a surfer. And he had friends who had bought property in the late 50s in Malibu and asked him to design a home. And the story goes that he paddled out on his surfboard and with a grease pencil, looking back at the shore, he designed this home. And the roof line is meant to emulate cresting waves, and the decks are meant to echo the shape of the incoming surf. And the roof tiles are hand-cut copper shingles that are meant to look like the scales of a fish. And I just wonder if my dog Cooper on the landing was photographed outside this house. Austin would buy this from Rod Stewart, who lived here in the 70s and 80s. And this house was actually featured in the movie Yesterday. And what else do I have to tell you? Oh, the railings were put in by Gessner because Rod Stewart wanted railings. And this was it under construction. And if it reminds you at all of the Sydney Opera House, the architect, a Danish architect who designed the Sydney Opera House, was said to have been inspired by this work. And I just wonder if Cooper, my dog, ever hung out in this sunken living room. This home would be sold in 2024 to Carly Kloss and Josh Kushner for $29 million. And Harry Gessner's house that he built for himself and his own family is right next door, and a really cool house as well. Okay, this is my oldest work. And this is it. It's small. And I paid $2.99. The price is still on the back of that foam core. And I know it was done before 1918 because the artist, Carl Reichardt, died in 1918. And it is signed. It is oil on wood. And this is just another shot of this dog. And the back says this name, Loek, which is a boy's name. And there's some writing in pencil, but even image processed, we weren't able to figure out what it says. And this was Carl Reichardt, who was born in Vienna, and his father had been a painter, and he trained in Munich and Rome and Graz, Austria, and he was known for small scale, highly detailed portraits of dogs. And these are just some of the dogs I found on the internet that he had painted. He also painted cats and kittens and horses. And then I saw he painted this dog who looks a whole lot like my dog. And he painted this black dog with a white chest a few times here and here and here. And then I saw he painted this dog. This dog's name was Shadow. And this dog belonged to this woman. And her name was Empress Elizabeth of Austria. She was also the Queen of Hungary, and she was known as Sissy. And I've never been to Vienna, but I knew who she was because I had found this cup and saucer on a bric-a-brac shelf, this souvenir from Vienna. And it got me thinking, could my dog be a Habsburg? So I wrote to people in Vienna because I have nerve. And I found photos of family members with big black dogs, and I heard back. But first, some quick monarch notes on this dynasty. Here is Sissy when she is 15 years old, and she had this carefree childhood in Munich and Bavaria, and she was a highly skilled equestrian. She grew up with a father who loved the circus, and it's rumored that she received riding lessons from circus performers. So when she's 15 years old, she accompanies her mother and her older sister, Helene, to Vienna because her older sister is set to meet and marry their first cousin, royalty. The mothers were sisters. So she goes along with her mother and Helene to meet Franz Joseph, the emperor. But he doesn't want Helene. He wants Sissy. And she doesn't want to get married. She's 15. But her mother says, you don't say no to the emperor. And so here she is during her engagement. And she said, marriage is an absurd institution. One is sold at 15, makes a vow one does not understand, and then ruse for 30 years. But they married. He was 7 years older, but he accommodated her by having a swing installed in the yard. By the time she's in her early 20s, she's already had 3 children. Her first daughter, Sophie, dies before the age of 2, which really devastated her. She would then have another daughter, and then finally the son, Crown Prince Rudolph. And she would have one more child named Mary. But her mother-in-law, who was also her aunt, kind of took over the child rearing, feeling she was too immature. And she was seldom photographed with her children, but she was photographed with her dogs. Uh, she is said to have had a 19-inch waist and probably an eating disorder. She loved big dogs. She's about 30 years old here, and she was quoted as saying, I almost fear that a dog as big as the one I want doesn't even exist. And this is a recent installation from 2004, and based on that photo I just showed you. This dog was also called Shadow. And she asked my guy, Carl Reichardt, to paint her. And here's how he painted her. They were about the same age. He painted her like this. So Prince Rudolph grows up. He marries Princess Stephanie once she reached puberty. They would have one daughter, but then his VD, he had gonorrhea and syphilis, which he would give to her, and that would make her sterile. And from what I read, he coped by drinking and taking morphine. So he was definitely a troubled soul. And he would ask this mistress of his if she would enter into a suicide pact with him. And she said yes. And they would end their lives here at his hunting lodge called Meyerling. But he did leave a will, and in his will, he bequeathed his dogs to his hunting companions. So now Sissy, his mom, has lost two of her four children, and she would really spend a lot of time away from Vienna. And this is the last photo of her at the age of 60. She was in Geneva and she got stabbed to death by an Italian anarchist. So, like I said, I had sent photos. This is her sister Helene from Bavaria with a big black dog. She's the one that got passed over by Franz Joseph. And this is another sister, Sophie, with a dog. And I did hear back, and here's what I heard. I've consulted our curators, and unfortunately, we cannot confirm any connection with Empress Elizabeth or any other member of the imperial dynasty. Both Elizabeth and Crown Prince Rudolph were dog fanciers and owned several dogs, and Carl Reichardt was one of the leading portrait painters of his time and was often commissioned by Elizabeth. But there is no proof that the dog depicted had any connection with the Empress. By the way, the photos do not show Elizabeth, but her sisters Helene and Sophie. I knew that. Anyway, the price for a painting of this quality was definitely a good deal, even if there is no link to the Habsburg dynasty. And I also heard back from this woman who was the former head of the Sissi Museum, pretty much saying the same thing, that there is no proof. But I still think it's within the realm of possibility. Okay, you have heard about fan fiction. This is a piece of fan art that I found. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that it was a playful wink and a nod to the Blue Dog series by George Rodrigue. And it's big, this painting, and it's on my landing next to Cooper. And I kind of like them both next to each other because there's blue sky and clouds and water and dogs. And what I love is there's two blue dogs, and one is up in the clouds looking down, and the other is looking up. But if you know anything about the Blue Dog series, the blue dog is always looking at you. And I know this because in 1995, my husband and I did that. Let's take a drive and drive up the coast. And we wound up in Carmel. And at the time, there was a Blue Dog Gallery, and the artist was actually living and painting in Carmel in the mid 90s. And that's my husband, Mike, and me in front of one of the big paintings. And that's me buying this book. And his books helped sell his art. So, this is George Rodrigue. And if you only know him as the artist of these Blue Dog series, there's so much more to know about this man. There's actually a documentary right now streaming. It's on PBS Plus and PBS Passport. I had to pay $5 to see it, but it's totally worth it. And just a little bit about his life. His parents were married for 20 years before they had him. He was an only child, and he grew up in a place called New Iberia, Louisiana, which is known as Cajun country. And in the early 50s, when he's 9 years old, he developed polio. And the vaccine doesn't come out until 1955. And fun fact about the polio vaccine, Dr. Jonas Salk, a 39-year-old scientist, refused to patent it. He wanted to make it widely available. And he said it would be like patenting the sun. So George is 9 years old. He's totally isolated. He can't see his friends. He can't go to school. And his mother brings home for him a newfangled kind of thing. It's called paint by numbers. But he has no interest in staying within the lines. So he turned the canvas over and he painted on the other side. And um, he determined at a young age he was going to be an artist. His mother wanted him to work for the telephone company. She was such a child of the Depression and wanted him to, have a pension. But he determines to study art and studies in Lafayette, Louisiana, and also in Los Angeles. He studies at the Arts Center College of Design in Pasadena. But after being in California for a few years, he goes back home to Louisiana and he starts painting landscapes. And he finds frames in thrift shops and junk shops, and he's painting to the frame a lot of times. And he would sell these paintings out of the trunk of his car and then rented some space in a gallery. But uh, his first review in a newspaper wasn't too encouraging. It said, "Painter makes bayou country dreary, monotonous place." But these moss covered trees would be in a lot of his work. And he would paint this self portrait of himself and hang it in that same gallery with his landscapes. And this is oil on linen. This is the first painting he did with people in it. It took him 6 months. And this was after a family photo from 1910. And this was a monthly occurrence of men meeting once a month on different lawns of different plantations and having these 6-hour meals. Each seated man had his own bottle of wine, and the servers stand behind them, and the women who cooked the food are in the back. This is called Jolie Blonde, and again, you see the oak tree. And this is a story, it's a Cajun waltz about a pretty blonde who left her Cajun lover for someone else. And he painted this in an hour, and it's considered his Mona Lisa. And he would paint versions of her over 100 times. Okay, this is a bit of history that I knew nothing about a mass deportation that took place in 1755. And it's the story, he did a series of 15 paintings on the story of the Acadians. And the word Cajun comes from the word Acadian. And Acadians were French settlers from Western France who had, in the 1600s, moved to a place that is now Nova Scotia. And then in the 1750s, the British took control of Acadia and demanded that Acadians swear an oath of allegiance to England, renounce their French identity and their Catholic faith. And when they refused, the British burned their crops and burned their homes and uh, drove them to the sea and to ships that they got on and went to all different places. And many of them wound up in Louisiana, southern Louisiana. This is called Sanctuary or Trap, and it was an Acadian church in Grand Prix in Acadie. And the British would tell the Acadian men that there was going to be a town meeting, and then they would detain them and deport them. And this is from a poem that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote called Evangeline. And Evangeline, she was a fictional character in this epic poem. And the story was that Evangeline was set to marry her fiance, Gabriel. But on the day of their wedding, they were separated. And she spends her life searching for him. And here she has this rosary of flowers. The Louisiana Constitution in 1912 forbade French from being spoken or taught in public schools. And that ban was overturned in 1974. Okay. In 1984, the World's Fair was going to be in New Orleans. And so in 1980, a few years before, businessmen got together and asked, they wanted to create a book of ghost stories, sort of as a souvenir of this event. And they asked George Rodrigue to paint 40 paintings for these various short stories. And he worked on them for 3 years. And this painting is called My Yellow Rolls Royce. And this was for a short story called Slaughterhouse. And the painting is called Watchdog. The house you see in the background is covered in blood. And when George was a little boy, his mother would tell him a story about this loup-garou, which was like a shape-shifting werewolf, boogeyman kind of character. And his mother would say to George, "You better be good, or the loup-garou is going to come and get you." And at an exhibition of all these paintings, uh, Rodrigue overheard people talking about the blue dog. And so things took off from there. And this was the photo that he used. This was his dog named Tiffany. And she was a Spaniel Terrier mix. And she would sit beside him when he painted in the attic of his home. And just look at that back foot. And his first wife, Veronica, and mother of his two sons, Andre and Jacques, brought home this dog one day. And so he starts painting the blue dog and the cut off oak tree. And these paintings really put him on the map worldwide. And he said, the dog never changes position. He just stares at you. And you're looking at him, looking for some answers. Why are we here? And he's just looking back at you, wondering the same. The dog doesn't know. You can see this longing in his eyes, this longing for love, answers. He did advertisements like this one. And do you see the bowl that starts saying Tiffany? This is, there was a singer, George Jones, who sang a song called He Stopped Loving Her Today. And it's a story of how a man's love for a woman only ends with his death. And you see the Jolie blonde hat by the man's grave. And George Rodrigue's father, also named George, had a company of portable concrete burial units. So you'll see a lot of tombs in the Blue Dog art. And the story goes that when sometimes these tombs would start lifting out, if there'd been heavy rains, uh, young George would put on a set of waiters and take a sledgehammer and knock out a corner so it would fill with water and go back down. And this song, you gotta play it sometime. he stopped loving her today. And these are just some lyrics. And this is him painting that painting. And it's 4 feet by 5 feet. And then here he is with Prince. He would do portraits of politicians, but only after they were elected, never before. And he was commissioned by the Democratic National Committee to paint this. This was when President Clinton and Vice President Gore were going into their second term. And Rodrigue did not want to include a blue dog, but Clinton insisted. And this is President George Bush Sr. with his 10 grandchildren. Rodrigue painted this on 9/11. He would often paint through the night and then sleep until noon. And here we see how he's made the blue dog, usually blue and joyful, colorless with grief. And the eyes, which are normally yellow, are now red. And they would print 1,000 of these posters, sell them for $500 each, and quickly raise $500,000 for the Red Cross. And so he realized he could sell his art to benefit causes that he believed in. And this was when Hurricane Katrina happened. That was very personal to him. He's a man of Louisiana. And this is called We Will Rise Again. And you see the Red Cross on his shirt, on his chest. And here he is signing multiple posters to sell. And here he is raising money again. And his relief efforts raised millions. After Katrina, he would send this poster to every member of Congress. And here he is uh, with Drew Brees, who played for the New Orleans Saints from 2006 to 2020. But the coolest thing he did, he visited schools. Together with his second wife, Wendy, who he married in 1997, they would travel to schools across Florida, Louisiana, New Mexico, and he visited schools and brought his art and brought his stories. And he would visit again and again and again. And in 2012, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, having never been a smoker. Uh, but he felt it was from years of using oil paints, thinning out the oil paints to save money with turpentine, using varnishes, all in unventilated spaces in his early years of painting. And he would die at the age of 69. But his widow, Wendy, has continued visiting schools with the George Rodrigue Life and Legacy Foundation. And she's also the author of this book called The Other Side of the Painting, which is a series of essays that she wrote about her life with George and their life together. And she has visited hundreds of schools and given over 800 presentations. And here's just another photo of her. And so I haven't found a George Rodrigue in a thrift shop yet, but I will. But I thought it would be kind of cool to try and get a copy of this book that came out in 1984. And so I went online and I found it like through a third party seller, and it said condition good. And I bought it and it came. And actually, this is it. Actually, the condition is pristine. And this is the painting that started it all with the Loop Guru. But I had to laugh when I saw where the book came from, because it came from a Goodwill in Macon, Georgia. And I think that's pretty cool. And I will just end with my dog, who we adopted 2 years ago. And she is very good, but sometimes reactive, just like me.